Hello from the Christian Educators National Office in Orange County, California. So many of our members and others were so generous in our campaign to support displaced Ukrainians from the war there. I just wanted to give a report back of what God has done in amazing ways to support these refugees. So let me explain why we're sitting here in this office, who I'm with, and why why we're doing this. This was not necessarily planned. This is a casual conversation. We thought, hey, all of us are in town for a meeting. We're in town for a national board meeting of Christian Educators Association. So on my right, far right here, is Dr. Clint Elliott, attorney, pastor, from Kentucky. He's our chairman of our board. This is Heidi Hoefs, a professor from Minnesota, and also on our board. And then this is Heather Kohnen, our AWAKE Director. And all three of them have played a very key role in our relationships to educators in Europe, to Proem, in fact, to this whole effort to raise money for these Ukrainian refugees. So we're sitting here and filming this in the last weekend of June as we're hosting our board of directors meeting. And I thought, hey, we're all in town for this meeting. Rather than do something over Zoom, why don't we just sit down in the office, turn on the cameras, and just kind of see what happens in terms of reporting what God has done. But first, let me give you a final update. Together, our Christian Educators family, together with some generous matching grants, raised over $54,000, $54,685 to be specific. And all of those funds have either already gone or will be going directly to help these displaced Ukrainians suffering from the war in their country. So we want to hear a little bit more of that story and just give a final kind of recap and tie a bow on this wonderful story of God's generosity through you that we were able to take part of. So Heather, would you give us a little background? How did this whole connection, partnership come about? How did God kind of write this story from the beginning here?
It's really been a story that's been unfolding for a while. Mm-hmm. We've had relationships with educators in Europe since 2013, and one of those connections is this organization called Eureka, which is the European Christian Educators Association.
Kind of like our counterpart in Europe, if you might say. Okay.
Our sister ministry.
Yeah. All right.
And Agnieszka is on the board, and she also is the head of the school and works with the camp and the Proem organization.
Yeah, and this school is in Poland.
Yes. And
they've been sort of overrun, I get ahead of myself, but they've been dealing with this refugee crisis, right? Okay, sorry.
Right, yes. From the minute the war started, they were playing a role in supporting and encouraging, praying for, helping people relocate, just really serving them in whatever capacity they needed.
So there was already a relationship with us and Proem and Agnieszka, and then the war started. And how did you sort of become aware that there was this crisis going on that we could play a role in helping?
Well, actually, we were in the process of planning a teacher conference in Poland before the war started. And so, here you're dealing with COVID. Is there a conference? Well, now there's a war.
Yeah.
But it really turned into such an amazing opportunity.
Yeah. Proem has a camp. They were housing, I think, about 200 refugees at a time. They were finding them permanent housing elsewhere in Europe, bringing more people in to replace them. They were clothing, feeding, housing them, educating their children. And so I remember Heather and I were driving in a car in the Portland area doing some events up there, and she started telling me the story, and both of us were just like, we've got to do something, right? We've got to do something. I know I'm sure many of you felt that, right? When the war first started, and there were people were flying Ukrainian flags everywhere. It was in that moment where we're like, we got to do something. And so you guys got to go to Poland just a week or two ago and see this firsthand. What's going on there? Heidi, what was it like to be there firsthand and see what was going on?
It was amazing. And it was so interesting because you don't think that you are. When we left, the agent at the gate was like, you know where you're going? Like, do you know you know what's going on over there?
Right.
I'm like, yeah, no, we are trusting God for this, to be able to go and experience this. So sitting alongside the Polish people and the Ukrainian people and then all of the European educators that we met was amazing. And to be able to talk to people from all over Europe with different experiences, but specifically sitting with some of the Ukrainians and just really allowing them to kind of share some of their story and listening. There aren't words to describe what we were hearing, but being able to pray with them or to sit with them, to listen to them was really a blessing. It was a gift to be able to sit there.
Yeah. Clint, now you've been part of this relationship going back to the very beginning. Got to be part of this teacher conference. What did you experience over there? What have you been seeing in this relationship with Eureka and what was that like?
Yeah, that's a good word, seeing. I mean, I've just been trying to watch and listen and see how God is unfolding these great opportunities. Beginning back in 2013 when I first met Honza Kuklinek, who was the director of the Network of Christian Teachers in the Czech Republic. And the Lord had brought him to the U.S. to experience some of our Daniel ministry training, and then he just began to dream, how can we do that in the Czech Republic? And I encouraged him, beyond the Czech Republic, Honza, you will be a leader among Europe. He now serves on the Eureka board 7 years later. But through that connection, my wife and I were invited to go to a Eureka conference in Sofia, Bulgaria. I love Sofia, wisdom, and it's just a time of wisdom to watch what God is doing. That's where we met Agnieszka and her husband and other board members and invited them to experience the Daniel ministries in the Czech Republic. And many of them came to a Daniel weekend, and the Lord has just been developing that relationship and the collaboration. And we are there to just complement what He is already doing. If we can be a resource, if we can be an encouragement. And so to watch what the Lord has been unfolding, and now to be there in Proem, in Poland, and in the midst of war, to see how God is working, nonetheless, and just in amazing ways, and to have 11 nations represented in the rooms, in the worship, in the teaching. For me personally, it's just a time of great learning. Of encouragement as I learn from others who have been walking this kind of walk as educators or ministry leaders in very similar kinds of situations, but so different in many ways. But so it's a great encouragement for us to go and to be a part of that and to see what the Lord has been doing for many years before we ever got there.
Right.
And to be invited in really to a front row seat to watch what God's doing there, even in the midst of war.
That's amazing. It's funny to hear from you guys, these European countries who don't have the same sort of constitutional structures in terms of separation of church and state or establishment clause, whatever, but they have a lot more history of religion or Christianity in the schools. And to see the openness that many of these countries have now to Christian teachers and the opportunity there. I've just been hearing some of your stories, and I'm so grateful to the three of you. I've yet to go over to Europe. I'm hoping to go at some point. Hint, hint. Anyway, but as the executive director of the organization, I'm just so grateful to the three of you because you have cultivated this relationship, and so when this crisis happened, we had sort of an existing way to reach out and help, and what a blessing.
Sometimes the Lord works in amazing ways in the midst of crisis and challenge. One story comes to mind as you were sharing, a young youth leader with Josiah Venture, which is one of the partners we partner with, Eureka, Josiah Venture, Christian Educators Association from the U.S., he was really struggling. He's in Ukraine. He was really struggling to access public schools. There was resistance. And when war broke out, everything changed. And just recently, Honza was sharing last weekend that this young man went back to the principal and said, we would love to be able to come in and help any way we can. And he said, okay, bring your sports camp in. We're going to cancel school that day and all the students will participate. And so they got to go in, 400 students, and share with them not just a sports camp but the gospel as well. And so in the midst of crisis, God is doing new things.
That's awesome. That's amazing, Glenn. Agnieszka reported back to us that, I love that this story because it's Christian educators here in America helping Christian educators in Poland help Ukrainians, right? We got to work through kind of our counterparts. Agnieszka from Proem reported back to us that about $35,000 of what we raised went directly to the camp to help them house, clothe, feed, and keep those refugees warm. She also said the remaining funds, over $15,000, are going to the school to educate the refugees or children of these refugees, and that, of course, just touches our hearts as educators very directly. Did the three of you, any of you, get to see the school in action? How was that? What was that like to see that over there? I mean, you were over there for a short time, but
yeah, the school was amazing. It was a school of excellence.
Yeah.
So people want to go to that school because they really do a nice job teaching, but they also have a faith foundation. So in Poland, a public school can receive government funds, but also have their belief system that as a foundation. So they receive some government funds, some funds from families, and they had countless stories because the majority of their students aren't Christians, and a lot of their staff aren't Christians. People coming to Christ through a really amazing school environment.
Yeah, and Proem, getting to work with them a little bit through this process, they have a heart for church planting. They have a heart for the gospel. Yeah. They have worship. They offer worship for their community every night to come and just end the day and the evening and worship the Lord. They offer chapel services. I mean, this is a really they are advancing the gospel, and I just love that about them.
No doubt.
The interesting thing about that, particularly as it relates to Christian educators and leadership in education, as I understand the development of their ministry, they went into this town and they planted a school. And out of the school, there was a church plant. They didn't plant a church and then build a school. They started a preschool that grew into a bigger school, and out of that grew a church.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
It's funny. Some of us in the American church, we think of Europe as a place where kind of Christianity went to die, and yet here is life, right? Here is the gospel being proclaimed and taking ground from the enemy. And in America, the church also thinks similar thoughts about the public schools, right? That this is a place that it's toxic, get away, and yet we know that there are thousands of people, thousands of stories around this country, hundreds of thousands of teachers who are bringing life into our public schools, and I just love that we're a part of that story.
Well, that faith integration is so critical to development, right?
Yeah.
So just to any development of these students, and we were able to see even Bible verses on the wall in the school, and we're like walking around kind of like, this is a public school, this is, and they are engaged, and that's right in over every classroom door or chalkboard is a cross and a crest or a shield of Poland. Nice. And so they're just right next to each other, and that's the foundation of this school. And it's really neat to see how the integration of faith right into the classroom can really make such a difference in the communities and in by the love of the teachers and the love of the organization itself. So.
Yes, wonderful. Were any of you able to interact with any of the actual Ukrainians that were there? Any stories or connections that our members would love to hear?
One of the mornings we had breakfast with a couple of ladies that were teachers in the school, and many of them, right? There were several, but the one in particular was a mom of 3 kids, and her and her husband and their 3 children came to Proem, and then another lady who had a 15-year-old son and brought her son, and the stories that they were sharing were incredible, where they're showing pictures of where they lived, and again, that's one thing to see it on TV, but to see it on their phone and in their camera it takes it to a different level. But that's where Proem was really able to support them, and those are the ladies that ended up with jobs at Proem to help support the Ukrainian students. And it's just exciting to see how God would begin to integrate them into this community, so that they could feel a part or whole, or maybe see some hope for a future day.
Okay.
Yeah, and hope was the theme of the gathering.
Even
a
before.
hopeful future. A hopeful future. Yeah, it originally was scheduled to be in Kyiv, and then COVID hit, and then the war, and then it was moved to Poland. But it was still a theme of hope, and some of the conversation through that was not just hope for the future, which was the original theme, but as one speaker shared very insightfully, we bring that future into the present, hope for today. And as Agnieszka has shared with us, as they were ministering to Ukrainians who were coming, as the Ukrainians were ministering to them, God was making their hearts tender with hope.
Yes.
And I love that story.
Yeah.
It's not mine.
Here's mine.
Oh.
All right. All right. So this is I told you we just turned on the cameras and we just said go, and then that's what happened. So
I want to share one more story about
yeah, go for it.
some of the Ukrainians there with us, because they were there participating in the gathering. They were in the small groups. Some of them were giving amazing presentations while we were there. And Saturday night of the conference, we had a time of praying for the nations. And I think there were 11 nations represented among the participants and the speakers. And in my small group, there was this young lady from Ukraine, far eastern Ukraine, who has experienced things that we can't understand. And as we were praying, heartfelt prayer, she was praying for the Russian people.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just a different perspective.
Yes, it is. Yes. Pray for your enemies, right?
And I was touched by a teacher who she is still teaching in Ukraine. She left the Ukraine to come, go to the conference, and then she was going back.
Yes.
And for me, that was so intriguing. Like, I can understand leaving, and I really think that was a call from the Lord to protect people. But I was like, why has she decided to stay? And we just had such an amazing conversation. And she just shared, God has called me to stay where I am and called me to serve where I am. And she said, for me to leave would be running away from what God wanted me to do. And I would not find joy and peace in being outside of His will.
That's right.
So she said, I can find joy and peace in the midst of a war.
Yes.
And for me, that really resonated in that, it's hard to work in public schools right now.
Yes.
It does feel uncomfortable. It
That's
does,
right.
and it is a spiritual battle.
Yep.
But to be faithful in obeying what God wants you to do.
That's
if
right.
God asks you to stay, knowing that He is with you and He can
That's
give you
right.
peace and joy in the midst of something that feels very difficult.
That's right. Well, what a good word to end on. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Clint. And I just want to encourage you, if any of you are watching this and your heart is breaking, maybe for the people of Europe or of Ukraine, or maybe you think, wow, God may be calling me to go over to Europe and do some training, or to see or pray or serve, get in touch with us. There might be opportunities for you to do that if the Lord leads. So again, thank you so much for your generosity to give of yourself, of your resources, to support what God has done through your giving and in Poland for these precious Ukrainians. We're so grateful. Thank you for watching this, and may you continue to be blessed as you serve in our schools. Thank you.